I stood barefoot on the cold tile of Larkspur International Airport, holding my boots. When two officers stepped in front of me, they didn't ask for my ticket. They told me there was a protective flag attached to my name. I was 33 years old with a spotless record, yet standing there, I realized the truth. My parents had not just coordinated a way to keep me off the plane, they had filed a legal lie to destroy my name. The phone rang at 11:42 on a Tuesday night, the kind of hour that suggests nothing good is waiting on the other end. I was awake, sitting on the floor of my living room in Holloway City, Ohio, sorting through a stack of blueprints for a commercial renovation downtown. The silence of my apartment usually comforted me. It was a controlled environment, one I had curated to be predictable, clean, and entirely mine. When I saw the area code, my stomach tightened. Virginia. I picked it up. Is this Sadie Bailey? The caller asked. The voice was female, professional, and clipped. Yes, I said, shifting my weight on the rug. Who is this? This is the clerk's office at Eden Park Probate Court in Delmont, calling regarding the estate of Walter Hensley. We have an emergency hearing scheduled on the docket for Thursday morning at 9 o'clock, given the recent filing regarding beneficiary status. Your presence is strongly advised. My hand froze over a roll of architectural drawings. Grandpa Walter. I had not spoken to him in 3 weeks, not since he had been moved into the assisted living facility my parents had selected with such aggressive efficiency. A filing, I asked. What kind of filing? I cannot discuss the particulars over the phone, the clerk said. However, the judge requested that all primary lineage descendants be notified immediately. If you intend to contest the motion, you need to be here. I hung up with a trembling hand. The word contest bounced around my skull. Contest what? Grandpa Walter was alive. He was frail. Yes, and his memory had developed holes that looked like moths had been eating away at the fabric of his past. But he was still the man who taught me how to fish in the creek behind his house. He was still the man who slipped me $20 bills when my parents refused to buy me school clothes that fit. I called my mother immediately. Marianne answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep, or perhaps just the performance of sleep. Sadie, she said, it is nearly midnight. The court just called me. I said. I stood up, pacing the length of my small kitchen. They said there is a hearing for Grandpa on Thursday. Did you know about this? There was a pause, a beat of silence that felt heavy. Oh, that, she said, her tone shifting into that breezy, dismissive register she used whenever I asked why my father was shouting or why money was missing from my savings account. It is just a formality. Sadie. We are moving some of his assets into a trust to protect him from taxes. You know how the government is. The court said my presence was strongly advised. I said. My mother sighed. You know how bureaucrats are. They love to make everything sound like a crisis. You do not need to come all the way out here. Your father and I have it handled. I gripped the phone tighter. I'm coming. Mom, if it involves Grandpa, I am coming. There was a muffled sound on the other end, the rustle of sheets, and then my father's voice in the background, low and indistinct. Then my mother came back, her voice brighter, almost manic. Well, if you insist, sweetheart. Actually, it might be good for you to see him. We can pick you up from the airport. Send me the flight details. In fact, put it on your card and I will reimburse you. I insist. The generosity struck me as odd. My parents, Grant and Marianne Bailey, did not reimburse people. They collected. They tallied debts. They kept score. But I was too anxious to parse the anomaly. I thanked her, booked the first flight out of Larkspur International for the next morning, and spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, wondering why the clerk had sounded so grim. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house to drop off my spare key. A ritual they insisted on in case of emergencies, though I suspected it was just another way to keep a tether on me. They lived in a sprawling, new construction home 10 miles north of me, a house that looked impressive from the street, but felt hollow on the inside. I found them in the kitchen. Grant was drinking coffee, staring at a tablet. Marianne was fluttering around the island, moving bowls of fruit that no one ate. You look tired. Sadie, my mother said, pecking me on the cheek. Her perfume was cloying, a floral scent that masked the smell of stale coffee. I did not sleep much, I admitted. I am worried about Grandpa. Grant didn't look up. He is fine. He is confused, but he is fine. This hearing is just to make sure we can pay his bills without a hassle. You are making a mountain out of a molehill. I placed my key on the counter. The court clerk made it sound serious. Dad, she said it affects beneficiaries. Grant's eyes flicked up then, icy blue and unreadable. He looked at me for a long second, then looked away. Just get on the plane. Sadie, we will see you in Virginia. I turned to leave, grabbing my purse. As I walked toward the mudroom, I realized I had left my phone on the island. I spun around to retrieve it. They hadn't heard me turn back. If she shows up, we lose the window, Grant whispered. It was a harsh, sibilant sound, like a tire leaking air. I froze. My hand hovered over the doorframe. She is already spooked, Marianne whispered back. Just let her come. We can manage her once she is there. She never speaks up in public anyway. I stepped back, my heart hammering against my ribs. I waited 3 seconds, made a loud scuffing noise with my boot against the floor, and walked back into the kitchen. Forgot my phone, I said, my voice sounding thin and foreign to my own ears. Grant smiled at me then. It was a terrifying smile because it looked exactly like the one he used when he was proud of me. Drive safe, honey. I drove to the airport in a daze. If she shows up, we lose the window. What window? I tried to rationalize it as I navigated the morning traffic toward Larkspur International. Maybe they meant a tax window. Maybe they meant a scheduling window with the lawyers. My parents were difficult. Yes, they were controlling. Absolutely. But they were not villains. They were just stressed. They were trying to manage an old man's declining years. I was the one being paranoid, projecting my own insecurities onto their practical conversations. I parked in the long-term lot and took the shuttle to the terminal, the gray Ohio sky pressing down on me like a wet wool blanket. I checked my bag, printed my boarding pass, and joined the long snake of travelers winding toward the security checkpoint. I was a project manager. My life was built on risk assessments, timelines, and clear communication. I did not like variables I could not control. Standing in that line, surrounded by the hum of rolling suitcases and the murmur of tired passengers, I felt a profound sense of unease. I kept replaying Grant's whisper. We lose the window. I reached the front of the line. The TSA agent was a young woman with tired eyes. She took my ID and my boarding pass. She scanned the barcode. The machine let out a sharp, descending tone. She frowned, looking at her screen. She scanned it again. The same tone. Is there a problem, I asked, trying to keep my voice light. One moment, she said. She did not look at me. She picked up her radio. Supervisor to lane 4, code Delta. That did not sound like a seat assignment error. People behind me began to shift and sigh. I felt the heat rising in my neck. I hated being the cause of a delay. I hated being looked at. A man in a blue uniform appeared. He looked at the screen, then at my ID, then at me. Ms. Bailey, he said, please step aside. Step aside. Why? Just come with me. Ma'am, bring your carry-on. I followed him out of the line, my socks slipping on the polished floor because I had not had time to put my boots back on. I carried them in one hand, my bag in the other, feeling absurd and small. He led me past the screening area, past the shoeless passengers, to a small, glass-walled room near the exit. 2 police officers were waiting there, real police, not airport security. Sadie Bailey, one of them, asked. He was older, with a gray buzz cut and a nameplate that read, Sergeant Miller. Yes, I said. What is going on? I have a flight in 40 minutes. We need to verify some information regarding a flag on your identification, Sergeant Miller said. Please, sit down. I sat on a hard plastic chair. I put my boots on the floor. My hands were shaking. I clasped them in my lap to hide the tremor. Am I under arrest? I asked. Not at this moment, the sergeant said, but you are being detained pursuant to a verification hold. A verification hold. The words meant nothing to me. Verification of what? The sergeant picked up a clipboard. We received a notification through the interagency database this morning. It is a civil protection flag, but because it involves travel across state lines to the residence of a protected person, it triggers an automatic stop for interview. I stared at him. I felt like he was speaking a different language. Protected person. Travel across state lines. I do not understand, I said. I am going to see my grandfather. He has a court hearing. The sergeant looked down at the paper. Walter Hensley, 82 years old, resident of Maple Haven Care Residence in Delmont, Virginia. Yes, I said. That is him. Ms. Bailey, the filing we have alleges that you have been engaging in a pattern of harassment and financial intimidation against Mr. Hensley. It states that you are traveling today with the intent to interfere with a protected adult and potentially remove him from his care facility without authorization. The room seemed to tilt. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder, filling my ears with white noise. Harassment, I whispered. I have never harassed anyone in my life. I send him books. I call him on Sundays. The sergeant turned the clipboard around so I could see the document. It was a printout, dense with legal jargon. My eyes scanned the text, catching phrases that felt like physical blows. History of aggression, financial coercion, flight risk. And there, at the bottom, was the source of the filing. Submitted by Pike Alder Legal Group on behalf of the petitioners. Petitioners, plural. Who are the petitioners, I asked. My voice barely audible. The sergeant flipped the page. Grant Bailey and Marianne Bailey. The air left my lungs. It wasn't a slow leak. It was a vacuum. My parents. My parents had told the police I was a danger to my own grandfather. I felt a wave of nausea so violent I had to grip the edge of the table to keep from sliding off the chair. This is a mistake, I said. I looked up at the sergeant, pleading with my eyes. My parents. I just talked to them. They bought my ticket. My mother offered to pay for my flight. Why would they report me if they bought the ticket? The sergeant's expression softened slightly, but his posture remained rigid. We see complicated family situations all the time. Ms. Bailey. Sometimes one party attempts to lure another into a violation. However, the filing is active. It is an emergency protective order. Until we can verify with the issuing court in Virginia that you are not a threat, we cannot allow you to board that plane. But the hearing is tomorrow, I said, panic rising in my chest. If I miss this flight, I miss the hearing. That may be a matter for your lawyer, the sergeant said. I didn't have a lawyer. I had a 401k and a Honda Civic. I didn't have people who fought for me. I was the person who smoothed things over. I was the person who absorbed the shock so the structure wouldn't break. The sergeant stood up. I am going to need you to wait here while we contact the Delmont jurisdiction. It might take some time. He left the room, closing the door with a heavy click. I sat alone in the glass box. People walked by outside, dragging their luggage, checking their watches, drinking their coffee. They looked at me, a woman sitting in a detention room with her boots on the floor and her face pale as ash. I saw the judgment in their eyes. They thought I was a criminal. They thought I had drugs in my bag or a weapon in my coat. But the truth was worse. I was accused of greed. The accusation struck at the very core of who I was. For my entire adult life, I had asked for nothing. I had paid my own tuition. I had paid for my own car. I had never borrowed money from my parents because I knew that every dollar came with a contract of emotional servitude. To be accused of harassing my grandfather for money, it was not just a lie. It was a weaponized inversion of my entire identity. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A text from Marianne. Are you on the plane yet? And then, 30 seconds later, call me ASAP. I stared at the screen. The audacity of it took my breath away. They knew. They knew exactly where I was because they had put me here. I dialed her number. She answered on the first ring. Sadie. Thank goodness. Did you take off? It is so loud. I cannot hear any engine noise. Her voice was brittle sweet, a confection made of spun sugar and razor blades. I am not on the plane. Mom, I said. I am in a police detention room at the airport. Oh my God, she gasped. The performance was flawless. What happened? Did you have something in your bag? I told you not to bring those large lotion bottles. Stop it, I said. I snapped the words, startling myself. Stop acting. They showed me the paper. Mom. They showed me the filing. Pike Alder. You and Dad. You told the police I was coming to kidnap Grandpa. There was a silence on the line. A long, heavy silence. When she spoke again, the sweetness was gone. The voice that replaced it was cold, flat, and entirely familiar. Sweetheart, maybe this is a sign I repeated. Maybe this is a sign to let the lawyers handle it, she said. You are emotional. Sadie, you always have been. We are trying to protect Walter. He is fragile. He does not need you bursting into court and making a scene. I have never made a scene in my life, I said, my voice rising. I am his granddaughter. I have a right to be there. Your grandfather doesn't want the stress, she said. That is a lie. After everything we have done for you, she snapped, her voice spiking in volume. We raised you. We supported you. And now, when we are trying to secure the family legacy, you want to come in and wreck it out of some misplaced sense of heroism. You are not a hero. Sadie, you are a distraction. I ended the call. I sat there, breathing hard, staring at the phone. If she shows up, we lose the window. It wasn't about protecting Grandpa. It was about the window. Time. They needed time. I needed to know what was happening in Delmont. I tried the number for the probate court again, but it went to a generic voicemail. It was lunch hour. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I hadn't used in 2 years. Clifford Marr, Grandpa's accountant. He was a man who wore suspenders and used a calculator that printed on paper tape. He was the only person my grandfather trusted implicitly. I hit dial. Clifford Marr, he answered. He sounded tired. Mr. Marr, this is Sadie Bailey, Walter Hensley's granddaughter. There was a pause, then the sound of a chair scraping, as if he had sat up straight. Sadie, I was hoping you would call, but I was afraid you wouldn't. I am at the airport, I said. I am stuck. My parents filed a protective order against me. They say I'm harassing Grandpa. I heard him exhale. A long, shaky breath. Sadie, listen to me carefully. They filed something this morning at the courthouse. An emergency petition. It was timed. They waited until the docket was locked to submit the supplemental evidence. What evidence, I asked. Fabricated logs, Clifford said. Phone logs, emails, things that make it look like you have been demanding liquid assets. I don't know how they did it, but it looks professional. Why, I asked. Why are they doing this? Because Walter made a change, Clifford said. He sent me a letter last week. He wants to change the executor. He wants to remove them. The room spun again. If they get the guardianship tomorrow, Clifford continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, they can invalidate that letter. They can claim he was incompetent when he wrote it. That is why they need the guardianship now. That is why they need you absent. If you aren't there to contest the narrative, the judge will grant it by default. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 1:30. I am detained, I said. I don't know if they will let me go. Sadie, Clifford said, you have to get here. I cannot stop them alone. I am just the accountant. You are the blood relative. I will try, I said. The sergeant came back in an hour later. He looked less suspicious and more weary. We spoke to the clerk in Delmont, he said. There is no active criminal warrant for your arrest. The protective filing is a civil matter. Technically, we cannot hold you. I stood up. So I can go. You can go, the sergeant said. But I am keeping the flag on your profile active for 24 hours. If you try to board another commercial flight, this process will repeat. And next time, if the local jurisdiction decides to elevate the order, you might not walk out. He handed me my ID, Ms. Bailey, he added, his voice lowering. If there is a dispute over an elder, the courts usually side with the party that has physical custody. I suggest you go home and sort this out from there. I walked out of the terminal. My flight was long gone. The next one was fully booked. And even if I could get on it, the sergeant's warning hung over me. They would stop me again. They would keep stopping me until the hearing was over. I went into the women's restroom near the baggage claim. I went into the handicap stall and locked the door. I sat on the toilet lid, fully clothed, and I shook. It was a physical reaction. a vibration that started in my marrow and rattled my teeth. I felt a mixture of rage and shame so potent it tasted like copper in my mouth. They had branded me, to the police, to the court, to the world. I was now Sadie Bailey, the woman who harassed old men for money. My parents had taken the one thing I valued most, my integrity, and traded it for a procedural advantage. I imagined going back to my apartment. I imagined calling a lawyer in Holloway City and waiting weeks for an appointment. I imagined sitting on my couch tomorrow morning while my grandfather sat in a courtroom alone, wondering why I hadn't come. Your mother said you were too busy to come. That is what they would tell him. They would break his heart to steal his wallet. I stood up. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes red-rimmed. I looked like a victim. I splashed cold water on my face. I watched the droplets run down my chin. No. I walked out of the airport and ignored the taxi line. I took the shuttle to the rental car center. I walked up to the counter of a budget rental agency. The clerk was chewing gum, looking bored. "I need a car," I said. "One way, to Delmont, Virginia." "That is a hefty drop-off fee," she warned, "and it's an 8-hour drive." I put my credit card on the counter. "I don't care. Give me whatever you have on the lot." 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a gray sedan that smelled like synthetic vanilla. I threw my bag in the passenger seat. I punched the address of the Eden Park Probate Court into the GPS. 8 hours and 14 minutes. If I drove through the night, stopping only for gas, I would arrive by 4 in the morning. I would have time to shower at a motel, put on my suit, and walk into that courtroom at 9 o'clock sharp. I pulled out of the garage and merged onto the highway. The rain started then, a slow, steady drizzle that blurred the lights of the oncoming traffic. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I turned off the radio. I didn't want music. I wanted to hear the sound of the tires on the asphalt, the sound of the engine, the sound of my own breathing. I rehearsed the words in the silence of the car. I said them out loud, testing the weight of them, letting them harden in the air between the dashboard and the windshield. My parents are lying. It was the hardest sentence I had ever learned to speak. But as the miles ticked away and the Ohio landscape faded into the darkness, I realized it was the only sentence that mattered. I drove east, into the dark, toward the war. The interstate was a black river cutting through the mountains of West Virginia. I had been driving for 4 hours. The white lines flashing past in a hypnotic rhythm that did nothing to calm the adrenaline pumping through my veins. The rental car hummed, a generic sound for a generic machine, carrying me toward a confrontation I had spent my entire life avoiding. My phone, mounted on the dashboard, lit up with a notification. It was not a text. It was an email from Clifford Marr. I waited until I saw a sign for a rest area, my hands gripping the wheel tight enough to make my knuckles ache. I pulled off the highway, the gravel crunching under the tires, and parked under the buzzing yellow light of a sodium lamp. The engine ticked as it cooled. I took a breath, the air in the car stale and smelling of industrial cleaner, and opened the email. Subject: Urgent. Review immediately attached was a PDF file. I tapped it open, pinching the screen to zoom in on the scanned document. It was stamped with the seal of the Eden Park Probate Court. Emergency petition for temporary guardianship. I read the legal abstract, my eyes skimming over the dry procedural language until they snagged on a paragraph halfway down the first page. Petitioners Grant and Marianne Bailey assert that the respondent, Walter Hensley, is increasingly susceptible to undue influence and financial exploitation. Petitioners further assert that family member Sadie Bailey acts as a disruptive influence, demonstrating a history of emotional instability and antagonism toward the protective measures established by the family. Disruptive influence. I stared at the words until they blurred. I was a project manager. I color-coded my calendar. I paid my bills 3 days early. I had never raised my voice in a restaurant. I was the person who apologized when someone else bumped into me, and yet, there it was. Filed in a court of law. Disruptive, unstable, antagonistic. I put the phone down on the passenger seat and looked out at the dark shapes of the trees surrounding the rest area. A truck rumbled past on the highway, a streak of red lights disappearing into the night. My mind began to spin backward, replaying the last 10 years of my life through this new, ugly lens. I thought about the time I wanted to move to Chicago for a job offer. My mother had sat me down, weeping softly, telling me that my father's blood pressure couldn't handle the worry of me being in a big city alone. She had said, "We just want you safe. Sadie." So I stayed in Holloway City. I thought about the time I asked about my grandmother's jewelry, which was supposed to be passed down to me. My father had put a hand on my shoulder, his grip just a little too tight, and said, "You do not need to worry about material things. Sadie, we are keeping them in a safe deposit box so you do not lose them." I never saw the jewelry again. They had always handled everything. They had insulated me, buffered me, steered me. I had always interpreted it as love, perhaps a suffocating, over-anxious kind of love, but love nonetheless. Now, sitting in the cold silence of a rental car in the middle of nowhere, I realized the truth. It wasn't anxiety, it was architecture. They had built a wall around me, brick by brick, not to keep the world out, but to keep me in, to keep me manageable, to keep me from asking questions that might threaten the control they wielded over the family narrative. Control had always worn the costume of care. I picked up the phone again. I needed a lawyer, not just any lawyer, but the one Clifford Marr had recommended in his hasty text message before I left the airport, Nina Carraway. I dialed the number. It was past 8 in the evening. I expected voicemail. "This is Nina Carraway." A voice answered. It was clear, low, and devoid of the distracted rustle that usually accompanies after-hours calls. "Ms. Carraway, my name is Sadie Bailey," I said. "Clifford Marr told me to call you." "I am currently driving to Delmont." There was a brief pause on the line. "Clifford sent me an encrypted message regarding your grandfather," she said. "Where are you now?" "I am in West Virginia. I will be in Delmont by early morning." "Good," Nina said. "I received a copy of the filing your parents submitted this morning. I assume you have seen it." "I just read it," I said. "They are calling me unstable. They are saying I am a risk to my grandfather." "That is the standard playbook for an ex parte emergency petition," Nina said. Her voice was surgical, precise, unalarmed, and oddly comforting. "They need to establish an immediate threat to bypass the usual notice requirements. By painting you as volatile and your grandfather as vulnerable, they create a scenario where the judge feels compelled to act first and ask questions later." "It is a lie," I said, my voice cracking. "It is a story," Nina corrected, "in probate court. The story that gets told first often becomes the truth until proven otherwise. We have to change the narrative before the cement sets." She paused, and I heard the click of a pen against a desk. "Sadie, I need you to answer a question, and I need you to think very carefully before you do. Did your grandfather ever mention a trust amendment to you? Something he did not tell your parents?" I frowned at the dashboard. "A trust amendment?" "No," I said. "He never talked about legal specifics. He just complained that my father treated him like a child. He said he was tired of asking for permission to spend his own money." "Think back," Nina pressed. "Did he mention signing anything recently? A new letter? A notepad he kept in his room? Anything that he might have described as an insurance policy?" I closed my eyes, trying to summon the memory of my last visit. 3 weeks ago, we had been sitting on the porch of the care facility. He had been lucid that day, sharp as a tack. He mentioned a letter, I said slowly. He said he wrote a letter to the court. He said he gave it to Clifford because he didn't trust the mail at the facility. "That is the executor change," Nina said. "We know about that. I am looking for something else, a codicil regarding the real estate assets." "Real estate?" I asked. "You mean his house?" "It is just an old farmhouse near the river. It is falling apart." "Is it?" Nina asked. "Or is that just what your parents told you?" The question hung in the air, heavy and ominous. "I do not know," I admitted. "We will discuss it when you get here," Nina said. "I am going to file a notice of appearance and an objection to the emergency petition tonight electronically. It will flag the docket so the judge knows you are represented. It might stop them from getting an order signed before the hearing starts tomorrow." "Thank you," I said. "Get some coffee." Sadie, Nina said, "You need to be awake when you walk into that courtroom. They are counting on you being exhausted. They are counting on you being the emotional wreck they described in that petition. Do not give them the satisfaction." I hung up and put the car in gear. I merged back onto the highway, the red taillights of the semi-trucks ahead of me looking like dragon eyes in the dark. I stopped 2 hours later in Canton Ridge, a small town huddled in the valley shadow of the Appalachians. To refuel, the gas station was a pool of fluorescent light in a sea of darkness. I bought a large black coffee that tasted like burnt nuts and a bottle of water. I washed my face in the restroom sink, staring at my reflection in the scratched mirror. My eyes were dark circles, my skin pale. I looked like a ghost. "You are not a ghost," I told myself. "You are the only person left who is real." I arrived in Delmont at 3:30 in the morning. The town was asleep, the streets empty and slick with dew. I didn't go to my grandfather's house. I knew my parents would be there, or at least they would have changed the locks. I didn't go to the care facility. It would be locked down. I checked into the Eden Inn, a single-story motel on the outskirts of the district that looked like it had been built in the 70s and hadn't seen a renovation since. The night clerk slid a key across the counter without looking up from his magazine. I went to my room. It smelled of lemon polish and old cigarettes. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress sagging under my weight, and opened my laptop. I needed to check my email again, to see if Clifford or Nina had sent anything else. There was nothing new from them, but there was a notification from a courier service, delivery exception, package 88921. I frowned. I hadn't ordered anything. I clicked the link. The tracking history showed a package sent from W. Hensley to Sadie Bailey 3 days ago. My heart jumped. Grandpa had sent me something. The status read, "Redirect requested by sender. Delivered to authorized family representative at 1402 Oak Lane." 1402 Oak Lane. That was my parents' rental address in Delmont. They were staying in a short-term luxury rental while they sorted out the estate. I clicked on the proof of delivery. It showed a signature authorizing the redirect. Walter Hensley. I stared at the digital image of the signature. It was written in blue ink. It spelled his name perfectly. The loops were smooth, the slant consistent, leaning slightly to the right. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the motel's air conditioning. My grandfather had suffered a minor stroke 2 years ago. It had affected his fine motor skills on his right side. When he wrote, his hand shook. His signature was jagged, often trailing off at the end, and he always, without fail, printed the capital H in Hensley because he couldn't manage the cursive loop anymore. This signature was elegant. It was fluid. It was a forgery. But it wasn't just a forgery. It was a forgery done by someone who remembered how he used to sign his name 10 years ago, but had forgotten the reality of his hands today. My parents had intercepted a package he tried to send me. They had redirected it to themselves, and they had signed his name to do it. I took a screenshot of the delivery notice and emailed it to Nina. "They stole a package," I typed, "and the signature is fake." I closed the laptop and rubbed my eyes. I was beyond exhausted, but sleep felt dangerous. I lay down on top of the bedspread, fully clothed, listening to the sounds of the motel, the hum of the ice machine outside, the distant wail of a siren. At 6 in the morning, my phone buzzed. It was Nina. "Meet me at the Silver Spoon Diner on 4th Street. 7 sharp." I showered, the water lukewarm and weak, and changed into the suit I had packed. It was a charcoal gray blazer and matching trousers, my armor for the corporate world. It felt stiff and uncomfortable here, in this world of family betrayal and cheap motels. The Silver Spoon was a chrome and neon relic that smelled of bacon grease and coffee. I found Nina Carraway in a booth near the back. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp features and hair cut in a severe, asymmetrical bob. She wore a black suit that looked expensive and a silk scarf knotted at her throat. "Sadie," she said, not offering a hand but nodding at the seat opposite her. "You made good time. I slid into the booth. I sent you the tracking info," I said. "I saw it," Nina said. She opened a manila folder on the table. "It is good evidence, but it is circumstantial until we get the actual document. However, it fits the pattern. She slid a paper across the table toward me. It was a printout of a corporate filing. I did some digging last night after you called, Nina said. You asked who Pike Alder are. They are a boutique firm that specializes in elder law and asset protection. But look at their registered address. I looked. Suite 400, 110 Riverview Plaza. Now look at this, Nina said, sliding a second paper over the first. This one was a business registration for a company called Redwood Gate Holdings. Registered address, Suite 400, 110, Riverview Plaza. They share an office, I said. They share a suite, Nina corrected, which usually means they share more than that. Redwood Gate Holdings is a shell entity. It was incorporated 6 months ago in Delaware. In the last 3 months, they have been aggressively acquiring property along the Delmont riverfront. She pulled out a map of the county. She pointed to a jagged blue line representing the river. She tapped a cluster of parcels marked in red. These are the properties they have bought, Nina said. Old warehouses, a defunct lumber yard, 2 residential lots. She moved her finger to a large green square right in the middle of the red cluster. And this, she said, is your grandfather's farm. I stared at the map. The green square was surrounded. It is the keystone, Nina said. Without his land, their development is cut in half. They cannot connect the commercial district to the highway access road. I looked up at her. You think my parents are selling the farm? I think Redwood Gate Holdings wants the farm, Nina said. And I think your parents have found a way to facilitate that sale. But Walter refused. He has lived there for 50 years. He told Clifford he would never sell. So they put him in a home, I whispered. And they filed for guardianship, Nina said. If they get temporary guardianship today, they have the legal authority to manage his assets. They can argue that the farm is a financial drain, that the upkeep is too much, and that liquidating it is in his best interest to pay for his care. They can sell it to Redwood Gate before Walter even knows it is gone. Suddenly, the inheritance hearing wasn't about sentimental heirlooms or family squabbles. It was a chessboard. My grandfather wasn't just an old man to them. He was an obstacle to a multi-million-dollar land deal. And I wasn't just a granddaughter. I was the only piece on the board standing between them and the checkmate. My phone rang. The screen flashed Mom. I looked at Nina. She nodded. Answer it. Put it on speaker. Do not say anything. Just listen. I tapped the green button and set the phone on the table. Sadie Marianne's voice flooded the booth, wet and trembling. Sadie, please tell me you are not coming. I said nothing. We are at the courthouse. Marianne sobbed. It is a circus. Your grandfather is so confused. He keeps asking for you. And we have to tell him you are busy. It breaks my heart to lie to him. But we cannot have you here upsetting him. I watched the phone. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. Sadie, are you there? Marianne asked. Then I heard it, a whisper in the background. Low, urgent, and distinct. Tell her she makes things worse. Use the guilt. It was Grant, my father. He wasn't comforting her. He was directing her. Sadie Marianne continued, her voice hitching up an octave. You always make things worse, honey. You know you do. You get so intense, and then everyone gets upset. Just stay in Ohio. We will call you when it is over. I looked at Nina. Her eyes were cold and hard. She reached out and tapped the red button, ending the call. That, Nina said quietly, is not grief. That is a script. She gathered the papers and slid them back into the folder. I filed an emergency response at 6 this morning, she said. I attached the affidavit from Clifford regarding the timing of the filing and the existence of the new executor letter. I also flagged the conflict of interest regarding the shared address. Though we need more proof to make that stick. What do we do now? I asked. We go to see Walter. Nina said, I scheduled a supervised visit for 8:30. The facility tried to block it, saying only guardians were allowed, but I reminded them that no guardian has been appointed yet, as his lawyer. I have access, and as his granddaughter, you are allowed as a guest unless there is a court order prohibiting it. The airport police said there was a flag, I said. A flag is not an order. Nina said, it is a warning. Until a judge signs that paper, you have every right to see him. We paid the bill and walked out into the gray morning light. The town of Delmont looked different to me now. It wasn't the sleepy, nostalgic place I remembered from childhood summers. It was a landscape of hidden agendas and shell companies. I followed Nina's car to Maple Haven Care Residence. It was a pristine, sterile building on a hill, surrounded by manicured lawns that looked like they had been vacuumed. My stomach churned. It wasn't the fear of the legal battle that made my hands shake. It was the fear of what I might find inside. What if my parents had gotten to him? What if they had whispered poison in his ear for weeks? What if he looked at me with the same suspicion I had seen in the eyes of the airport police? We parked. Nina checked her watch. "Let me do the talking at the front desk," she said. "You just look like a concerned granddaughter." We walked toward the glass doors. I felt a phantom weight on my chest, the pressure of the lies that had been told about me. Later that night, after the visit, which had been a revelation of its own, I was back in the motel room. The day had been a blur of legal maneuvering and emotional shocks. But now, in the silence of the room, the paranoia returned. I changed into a t-shirt and sweatpants, but I didn't feel relaxed. I felt exposed. I went to the door to double-check the deadbolt. As I reached for the lock, I stopped. The metal plate around the latch was scratched, bright, fresh scratches in the brass, as if someone had taken a screwdriver to it. I froze. Had those been there when I checked in? I couldn't remember. I leaned closer. The wood of the doorframe was slightly splintered near the strike plate. It looked like someone had tried to jimmy the lock, or at least tested it to see how much force it would take to break. I stepped back, my heart hammering against my ribs. Was it a previous guest? A clumsy maintenance worker? Or was it a message? "You are not safe here." I remembered Grant's voice on the phone. If she shows up, we lose the window. I remembered the ease with which they had lied to the police, to the court, to my grandfather. People who could do that. People who could erase a family member for a real estate deal. What else were they capable of? I didn't know if I was being paranoid or prudent, and in that moment, I realized I didn't care. The line between the two had been erased. I grabbed the heavy wooden chair from the desk. I dragged it to the door. I wedged the back of the chair under the door handle, tilting it so that any pressure from the outside would only drive the legs deeper into the carpet. It was a primitive barricade, something a child would do to keep out monsters. I backed away, staring at the chair. My parents' lie had started on a piece of paper in a courthouse, but now it had reached beyond the paper. It was in the scratches on the lock. It was in the silence of the room. It was in the fear that kept me standing there, watching the door, waiting for it to move. I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark, listening to the world outside, waiting for the morning that would bring either justice or ruin. The morning sun did not break through the clouds over Delmont. Instead, the sky remained a bruised purple, hanging low over the wet asphalt of the parking lot at Maple Haven Care Residence. I sat in the passenger seat of Nina Carraway's sedan, watching the automatic doors of the facility slide open and closed, swallowing visitors and spitting out uniformed staff. My hands were cold. I rubbed them against the fabric of my suit trousers, trying to generate friction, trying to feel something other than the hollow dread that had settled in my stomach since the airport. "We should go in," Nina said. She turned off the engine. The silence in the car was sudden and heavy. "I am afraid," I admitted. My voice sounded small in the enclosed space, afraid of what Nina asked. She didn't look at me. She was gathering her briefcase, checking the clasp. "I am afraid he will look at me and see what they told him to see," I said. "I am afraid he will think I am the villain." Nina paused. She turned to me then, her expression softening just enough to show the human beneath the lawyer. "Sadie, memory is a fragile thing, especially under stress, but character is durable. Your grandfather knows your character. Lies are loud, but presence is louder. That is why they tried to keep you away, because just by standing in the room, you disprove the lie." I nodded. Though I didn't fully believe her, I felt tainted. The accusation of greed is a stain that doesn't wash out easily. We walked to the entrance. The air smelled of rain and damp earth, that specific scent of a Virginia morning. Inside, the air changed instantly. It smelled of antiseptic, floor wax, and the vague, sweet scent of air freshener trying to mask the odor of aging bodies. The receptionist sat behind a high counter that looked more like a fortress wall than a welcome desk. She was a woman in her 50s with stiff, dyed blonde hair and glasses suspended on a beaded chain. She watched us approach with a practiced neutrality. "Good morning," Nina said, placing her business card on the counter. "I am Nina Carraway, attorney for Walter Hensley. This is his granddaughter, Sadie Bailey. We are here to see Mr. Hensley." The receptionist picked up the card, read it, and then turned to her computer. Her fingers tapped on the keyboard. The clicking sound was the only noise in the lobby. "I am sorry," she said, her voice flat. "Mr. Hensley is on a restricted visitor protocol. Only approved visitors are allowed access." My heart hammered against my ribs. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of the counter. "I am his granddaughter," I said. The receptionist looked at the screen. "Not at me." "I understand that, ma'am. But your name is not on the list." "Who is on the list?" Nina asked, her voice sharpening. The receptionist hesitated. "The primary contacts listed are Grant Bailey and Marianne Bailey. They have marked the file for family only." "I am family," I said, my voice rising. "I am his daughter's daughter." "Please lower your voice," the receptionist said. She looked at me then, and I saw the judgment in her eyes. It was the same look the airport police had given me. She saw a disruption. She saw the instability my parents had warned them about. My hands began to tremble. It was a visible tremor, shaking the pen attached to the sign-in clipboard on the counter. "I need to see him," I said. "Please, I can have you fill out a request form," the receptionist said, sliding a sheet of paper toward me. "The administrator will review it." "A request form." I looked at the paper. It asked for my name, my relationship, and the purpose of visit. I felt a wave of humiliation so intense it made my face burn. I was 33 years old. I was a professional. And here I was, begging for permission to see my own grandfather, filling out a form like a truant schoolchild. I picked up the pen. My hand shook so badly the letters came out jagged. Purpose of visit. To see my grandfather. I stared at the words. They looked pathetic. Nina placed a hand on my arm, steadying me. She looked at the receptionist. "Tell Administrator Vance that I am here," Nina said. "Tell him that we have a hearing in probate court tomorrow morning regarding the guardianship of Mr. Hensley. Tell him that if I am denied access to my client today, I will file a motion to compel by noon, and I will subpoena the facility's visitation logs to show a pattern of isolation." The receptionist blinked. The boredom vanished from her face. "I will call him," she said. 10 minutes later, we were sitting in the office of Administrator Vance. He was a man who looked like he was made of soft dough, wearing a suit that was slightly too tight. He seemed nervous, his eyes darting between Nina and me. "Miss," Carraway Vance said, clasping his hands on his desk, "you understand our position. Mr. and Mrs. Bailey expressed deep concern about Mr. Hensley's stress levels. They indicated that family conflict was exacerbating his condition. We are simply following the care plan." "The care plan is not a court order," Nina said. "Mr. Hensley is not under guardianship yet. He retains his full rights of association. Unless you have a judicial decree barring Ms. Bailey, you are unlawfully restricting his social interaction." Vance sighed. He looked at me. "Ms. Bailey, your parents were very specific. They said you have a history of aggressive outbursts." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Aggressive outbursts. That is a lie," I said quietly. Vance looked uncomfortable. He shifted in his chair. "Look, I don't want to get in the middle of a domestic dispute. I run a care facility, not a courtroom. Then let us do our job," Nina said. "We need 30 minutes. Supervised. If that makes you feel better, you can have a nurse in the room, but we are seeing him." Vance rubbed his forehead. "Fine, 20 minutes, with a nurse present, and if there is any agitation, any at all, the visit ends immediately." We followed a nurse down the hallway. The floor was polished linoleum that squeaked under my shoes. We passed open doors where elderly people sat in armchairs, watching television, or staring out the window at the gray sky. We reached room 304. The door was closed. The nurse, a stoic woman named Brenda, knocked once and opened it. "Mr. Hensley," she said loudly, "you have visitors." I stepped inside. The room was small and beige. There was a single bed, a nightstand, and a television mounted on the wall. My grandfather was sitting in a wheelchair by the window, his back to us. "Grandpa," I said. He turned. He looked older than I remembered. His face was thinner, the skin clinging tighter to the bone, revealing the architecture of his skull. His hair, usually combed back, was wispy and disarrayed, but his eyes were the same. They were a piercing, watery blue. He squinted at me, his brow furrowing. For a second, I thought he didn't know me. I thought the stress had finally broken his mind, just as my mother claimed. Then his eyes widened. The fog cleared. "Sadie," he said. He tried to stand, his hands gripping the armrests of the wheelchair, but his legs were weak. He sank back down. I crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside him. I took his hands. They were cold and dry, like parchment paper. "Sadie," he repeated. He looked at my face, studying me with an intensity that made me want to weep. "You look like you have been running." The words knocked the air out of me. I had been running from the airport, from the police, from the lies, from the shame. "I am here now," I said, my voice thick. "I am so sorry. Grandpa, I tried to come sooner." He shook his head. A small, confused movement. "Your mother said you were busy. She said you had a big project at work. She said you couldn't get away." I froze. I looked at Nina, who was standing by the door, watching us. "She lied," I said. I gripped his hands tighter. "Grandpa, I came as soon as I heard. I tried to fly in yesterday, but there was a problem." "A problem?" he asked. I took a breath. I had to ask. I had to know. "Grandpa, did you tell anyone that I was harassing you? Did you tell anyone that I was asking you for money?" He recoiled, pulling his head back as if I had slapped him. "Harassing me," he said. His voice was raspy, but the confusion was genuine. "Why would I say that? You never ask for anything. You are the only one who doesn't." "My parents filed a paper with the court," I said, forcing the words out. "They said you needed protection from me. They said I was a danger to you." Walter Hensley stared at me. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. A look of profound hurt washed over his face, followed by a slow, dawning horror. They said that he whispered, "Yes." He looked down at his hands, his thumbs tracing the veins on the back of my knuckles. "I signed something," he said quietly. "Last week. Marianne brought it. She said it was a medical consent packet. She said the facility needed it to update my prescriptions. She said we had a family meeting about it, but I didn't remember the meeting. She told me I was having a bad day." He looked up at me, his eyes wet. "I thought it was for my heart medication." "Sadie, I didn't read it. I trusted her." The room went silent, save for the hum of the HVAC unit. "It wasn't medical consent," I said. "It was an affidavit, or maybe a petition. They used your signature to build a case against me." Walter closed his eyes. A single tear leaked out and tracked through the deep lines of his cheek. "I am so tired." "Sadie," he said, "I am so tired of trying to figure out what is true." I squeezed his hands. "I know, but we are going to fix it." Nina stepped forward then. "Mr. Hensley, I am Nina Carraway. I am an attorney. Sadie asked me to help." Walter looked at her, then back at me. "A lawyer," he said. "It has come to that. Mr. Hensley." Nina said gently, "We need to know why you are here, in this facility." Walter sighed. He looked out the window at the parking lot. "It was the men in the suits," he said. 2 weeks ago, they came to the house. Grant brought them. They said they were from a development group. Redwood something. Redwood Gate." Nina supplied. "Yes," Walter said. "They had maps. They showed me a plan to turn the riverfront into a shopping district. They wanted my land. They said they would pay a premium." What did you say? I asked. I told them to get off my porch, Walter said, his voice gaining a flicker of its old strength. I told Grant that I was born in that house and I would die in that house. I told him I wasn't selling my legacy for a strip mall. And then Nina prompted. Then the argument started, Walter said. Grant was furious. He said I was being selfish. He said the property was worth millions. He said I was throwing away the family fortune. He paused, his breathing becoming shallow. 2 days later, Mary Ann came over. She brought lunch. I ate it. And then I felt heavy, dizzy. When I woke up, I was here. Here. Grant told me I had a spell, Walter said. He said the doctor recommended 24-hour observation. He said it was just for a few days. That was 2 weeks ago. Every time I ask to go home, they say I'm not stable enough. He looked at me, his eyes sharp again. I didn't request this move. Sadie, I was moved. The implication hung in the room like smoke. I ate lunch. I felt dizzy. My stomach turned. Had they drugged him? Or was he just old and confused, as they claimed? But the timing, the refusal to sell, followed immediately by the incapacitation. It was too neat. Did you sign anything else? I asked. Walter nodded. The letter. I wrote a letter. The executor letter, Nina said. We know about that. You gave it to Clifford Marr. Yes, Walter said. I realized Grant was negotiating around me. I didn't want him to have control if something happened to me. So I wrote a new will, or a codicil. I named Clifford as executor. I explicitly stated that Grant and Mary Ann were not to make financial decisions. He looked at Nina. Did Clifford give it to the court? Not yet, Nina said. But he has it. There was a commotion in the hallway, loud voices. The nurse, Brenda, stepped toward the door. You can't go in there, a voice shouted. The door flew open. Clifford Marr stood there. He was breathless, his face pale and sweating. He was wearing a raincoat that was dripping wet. He looked wild. Mr. Marr, the nurse said, you are not on the list. Sadie Clifford gasped. He ignored the nurse. He looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. Clifford. I stood up. What is it? They broke in, Clifford said. He leaned against the doorframe, clutching his chest. My office. Sometime last night, my blood ran cold. What did they take? Nina asked sharply. Clifford shook his head. They didn't take the petty cash. They didn't take the laptops. They pried open the file cabinet, the one in the back. He looked at Walter, his expression crumbling. They took the folder. Walter, the blue folder, the one with the sealed letter. Walter let out a sound, a low, pained groan. He slumped back in his wheelchair. It is gone, Clifford said. The only copy. It is gone. The room seemed to tilt. The one piece of evidence that proved Walter's intent, the one document that stripped my parents of their power, had been stolen. I looked at Clifford. He was trembling. I am so sorry, Clifford stammered. I should have put it in the safe. I thought the cabinet was locked. I thought, it is not your fault, I said, though I felt a surge of irrational anger toward him. Why hadn't he been more careful? Why hadn't he made a copy? But I saw the guilt eating him alive. It was the same guilt I felt. The guilt of being outmaneuvered. The guilt of underestimating the people we loved. Guilt is contagious in families. It starts with the perpetrators, but they don't feel it. They offload it onto the victims and the bystanders. My parents felt no guilt. Therefore, Clifford and I had to carry it all. Nina stepped between us and the door. Did you call the police? She asked Clifford. Yes, Clifford said. They filed a report, but there were no cameras, no prints yet. It was clean. Of course it was clean. Nina turned to me. Her face was set in a hard line. We have to go on the offensive, she said. How? I asked. We have nothing. We have the pattern, Nina said. The redirected mail, the break-in, the sudden medical transfer, the alias. She lowered her voice. We request the court compel disclosure of all communications between your parents, Pike Alder, and Redwood Gate. We subpoena the emails. We subpoena the phone records. I hesitated. If we do that, I said, If we accuse them of theft and fraud in open court, there is no going back. Sadie Nina said, "Look at your grandfather. Look at Clifford." I looked. Walter was pale, his eyes closed. Clifford was leaning against the wall, defeated. "They already lit the match," Nina said. "You are just deciding whether to let the house burn down or try to put it out." I opened my mouth to speak, but a voice cut across the room. "Well, this is a party." I spun around. Grant Bailey stood in the doorway. He was wearing a camel-colored cashmere coat and a smile that showed too many teeth. He looked vibrant, healthy, and utterly in control. He didn't look like a man whose daughter was detained by police. He looked like a man who had just won a round of golf, Grant Clifford said. Straightening up, Clifford Grant said, nodding. "Tough luck about the office. I heard about the break-in. Terrible neighborhood. Downtown. You really should upgrade your security. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away." He knew. He absolutely knew. Grant looked at me. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. "Sadie," he said, "I thought we agreed you were going to stay in Ohio." "You agreed," I said, my voice shaking. "I never agreed." He sighed, walking into the room as if he owned it. He walked past me, past Nina, and stood over Walter's wheelchair. "Dad," he said loudly, using that tone people use for children and the hard of hearing, "you have got quite a crowd today. A bit much for your heart. Don't you think?" Walter opened his eyes. He stared at his son. Grant placed a hand on Walter's shoulder. It looked like a gesture of affection, but I saw the pressure in his fingers. I saw Walter wince. "We are just trying to keep you safe." Dad, Grant said, "Sadie doesn't understand the complexity of the situation. She is emotional." "Stop it." The voice was low, but it cut through the room. Grant looked down. "What?" Walter knocked Grant's hand off his shoulder. It was a weak slap, but the rejection was absolute. "Stop talking to her like that," Walter said. Grant froze. His smile faltered. Just for a fraction of a second. He hadn't expected resistance. He hadn't expected the old man to have any fight left. "She is not emotional," Walter said, his voice gaining traction. "She is the only one here who isn't lying to me." Grant's face hardened. He straightened his coat. "You are confused." "Dad, the medication." "I am not confused," Walter snapped. "I know what you are doing." "Grant, I know about the land." Grant's eyes flicked to me, then to Nina. The mask of the concerned son slipped, revealing the cold calculation underneath. "This isn't your lane. Sadie," he said to me, "you are a project manager. You fix old buildings. You don't know the first thing about asset management. You are going to bankrupt this estate before you even inherit a dime." "It is not about the money," I said. "It is always about the money," Grant said. "Oh, Walter." The wail came from the hallway. Marianne rushed in. She was wearing a black dress and a pearl necklace, dressed as if she were attending a funeral. Her face was blotchy, her eyes red. She threw herself at Walter's knees, ignoring the wheelchair brakes. "Oh, Dad, I was so worried," Marianne sobbed. "The staff told me there were people here upsetting you." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "Sadie, how could you?" she cried. "After everything we told you. He needs rest. He needs peace. And you bring lawyers? You bring the police to the airport?" I stood there, stunned by the performance. It was flawless. The shaking shoulders, the pitch of the voice, the desperate clutching of Walter's hand. "She is unstable," Marianne told the nurse, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She is unstable from stress. She has been having episodes. Please, you have to make her leave." I looked at my mother. I saw the tears, but I also saw the way she positioned herself, perfectly angled so the nurse and the administrator could see her distress. I saw the way she checked Grant's face for approval. She wasn't lying. She was reciting. My heart broke then. It wasn't a crack. It was a shattering. I had spent my life thinking my mother was weak, that she was a victim of my father's domineering personality. I had excused her behavior for decades because I thought she was just trying to survive him, but she wasn't a victim. She was a co-author. "Sadie looked at me," Walter said. I looked down at him. Marianne was still weeping on his legs, but he was looking past her, straight at me. "Don't leave," he said. "I won't," I said. Administrator Vance stepped into the room. "Okay, that is enough," he said. "Mr. Hensley is clearly agitated. The visit is over. Everyone out." "But he asked me to stay," I said. "Out," Vance said. "All of you, or I call security." Nina grabbed my arm. "Come on," she whispered. "We have what we need." "What do we have?" I asked, as we walked out to the parking lot. The rain had started again. A cold drizzle. "We have a stolen letter and a theatrical performance." "We have a witness," Nina said. "Walter knows. He is awake, and he saw them." She unlocked the car. "And we know they are scared," she added. "Scared?" I asked. Grant didn't look scared. He looked arrogant. "People don't break into offices unless they are scared," Nina said. "People don't put on performances like that unless they are terrified the audience is walking out." We drove back to town. Clifford went to the police station to update his report. I went back to the motel. The afternoon passed in a blur of anxiety. I sat in the motel room, staring at the barricaded door. I kept hearing Grant's voice. "This isn't your lane." I kept seeing Marianne's tears. At 7 o'clock, Nina came to the motel. She brought takeout containers of pasta and a bottle of cheap wine. She looked exhausted. We ate in silence for a while, sitting on the 2 rickety chairs by the window. Then Nina's phone pinged. She picked it up. She frowned. "What is it?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. "It is an email, from an encrypted address." She turned the screen toward me. Subject: Truth. Attachment: You are not crazy. PDF. "Who is it from?" I asked. "Anonymous." Nina said. She tapped the attachment. It downloaded slowly on the motel's weak Wi-Fi. Then it opened. It was a scanned document, a consulting agreement. Parties: Redwood Gate Holdings and Harborline Advisory. Consultant: GBH. GBH. I read aloud. Grant Bailey. Hensley. Nina finished. That was his mother's maiden name. He uses it for his LLC sometimes. She scrolled down. Scope of work: Facilitation of land acquisition regarding Parcel 44A, Hensley Farm. Compensation: Success fee of $250,000 payable upon transfer of deed. $250,000. That was the price. That was the value of my grandfather's life. That was the cost of my reputation. Nina looked at me. "This proves motive," she said. "It proves he has a financial interest in the guardianship that he didn't disclose to the court." I stared at the screen. "Who sent this?" I asked. Nina pointed to the bottom of the email. There was a single line of text. "I am tired of being the bad guy. Dylan Rourke," I whispered. "The junior analyst." I didn't know who Dylan Rourke was yet. Not really. I only knew him as a name on a website Nina had shown me. But I knew the tone of that sentence. It was the tone of someone who had reached their limit. "We have them," Nina said. I looked at the barricaded door. Maybe I said, "But they are not going to stop. They broke into an office. They lied to the police. If they find out we have this—" "Then we better use it fast," Nina said. She poured more wine into the plastic cup. "Get some sleep. Sadie, tomorrow, we go to war." I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, listening to the rain, clutching my phone like a weapon. I thought about my mother's tears. I thought about the way she had looked at me with genuine hatred when she realized I wasn't playing along. "You look like you have been running." I was done running. The document on the laptop screen was a scanned image of a consulting agreement, but to me, it looked like an autopsy report of my family. Nina Carraway sat across from me in the motel room, her face illuminated by the blue light of the screen. It was 6 a.m. Neither of us had slept more than an hour. GBH. Nina read aloud. Grant Bailey Hensley. She typed rapidly into a search bar, navigating through the Maryland Business Registry. We had traced the alias from the anonymous email sent by Dylan Rourke to a small registered agent in Crescent Harbor, Maryland. "Here it is," Nina said, her voice flat. "Harborline Advisory, incorporated 4 years ago. Sole proprietor, Grant B., Hensley. She clicked on the filings. It is a consulting firm, Nina said. Ostensibly, but look at the revenue model described in their tax abstract. They do not bill by the hour. They bill by the transaction. She pointed to the phrase, success fees contingent upon acquisition closing. I stared at the screen. My father had created a company solely to accept payouts for deals he helped facilitate. And now, he was facilitating the sale of his own father's home. $250,000, I said. That is the fee listed in the Redwood Gate draft. It is a kickback, Nina said. It is legal if he discloses it, but he has not disclosed it to the probate court. In fact, he is asking for guardianship to protect the estate, while simultaneously positioning himself to profit from its liquidation. I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the stale motel coffee. It was a quiet, sinking sensation, like swallowing a stone. This was not the dramatic betrayal of movies. There were no shouting matches, no thrown vases. This was bureaucratic violence. It was paperwork filed in triplicate to erase a man's legacy so his son could buy a vacation home or pad a retirement portfolio. I stood up and walked to the window. I pulled back the curtain an inch. The parking lot was empty, save for a few trucks. I realized then that I was grieving. I was not grieving my grandfather. He was still alive, still fighting. I was grieving the idea of my parents. I was mourning the safety I thought they represented. For 33 years, I had believed that their controlling nature was a symptom of anxiety, of love that was too tight. I had believed they wanted to protect me, but they did not want to protect me. They wanted to manage me, and now that I was unmanageable, I was an enemy. The hardest part was that I still wanted my mother to be innocent. I wanted to believe that Grant was the mastermind and Marianne was just the terrified accomplice. I wanted to be able to save one of them. Nina interrupted my thoughts. Sadie, look at this. I turned back. I just pulled the latest docket updates, Nina said. Pike Alder filed a supplemental statement yesterday afternoon, right after you were detained at the airport. She opened the file. Notice of flight risk and intent to remove protected person. I stepped closer, reading the text over her shoulder. The petitioners have credible evidence that Sadie Bailey intends to remove Walter Hensley from the jurisdiction of Eden Park Probate Court. On January 10th, Ms. Bailey stated her desire to take the respondent to a location where family could not reach him. I froze. I never said that, I whispered. Nina looked at me. Think back. January 10th. Did you talk to your mother? I closed my eyes. January 10th. It was a Tuesday. I had called to check on Grandpa. Marianne had answered. I had been frustrated because I hadn't been able to visit for Christmas. I told her I wanted to take him out for lunch, I said slowly. I told her the facility felt suffocating. I said. I hesitated, the memory sharpening. I said, I just want to take him somewhere quiet, away from all the noise, where we can actually talk. Nina nodded grimly. And they turned somewhere quiet into outside the jurisdiction. They turned a lunch date into a kidnapping plot. It is a half-truth, I said. That is why it works. That is how they built the airport flag, Nina said. They took a kernel of frustration and watered it with paranoia until it looked like a threat. My phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I looked at Nina. Answer it, she said. But record it. I hit the record button on Nina's phone and answered mine. Hello, Ms. Bailey? The voice was young, male, and shaking. This is Dylan, I asked. Don't use my name, he said, even through the distortion of the cell connection. I could hear the anxiety rattling in his chest. I sent you the email. Did you get it? I got it, I said. Thank you. I can't talk long, he said. I am on my break. I am at the coffee shop on 3rd Street, the one with the green awning. If you want to know the rest, you have to come now. I grabbed my coat. Nina drove. We parked a block away from the coffee shop. It was a hipster place, full of exposed brick and people working on laptops. I saw him immediately. He was sitting in the back corner, wearing a hoodie pulled up over a dress shirt. He looked like a college student trying to blend in, but his leg was bouncing under the table like a jackhammer. I walked over. Nina sat at a table nearby, close enough to hear, but far enough to give us space. Dylan? I asked. He jumped. He looked up at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Sit down," he hissed. "Please." I sat. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. Dylan looked at his hands. He was shredding a paper napkin into tiny, snowy piles. "I am a junior analyst," he said. "I run spreadsheets. I calculate yield. I don't do this. Do what I asked." "I was in the meeting," Dylan said. "Last month. With your father. And the partners from Redwood." He lowered his voice to a whisper. "They were joking about it. Your father was joking about how easy it was to get the old man certified. He said, 'Dad trusts the doctors if I tell him to.' He laughed about it." My stomach clenched again. The nausea returned, sharper this time. Dylan continued, "My grandfather had dementia. Real dementia. We watched him fade for 5 years. It was hell. To see someone fake that? To see someone engineer that for a land deal?" He looked up at me, and I saw the moral disgust warring with his self-preservation. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "I saw the filing yesterday. I saw what they said about you. Tell me about the agreement," I said. "The one contingent on guardianship." Dylan pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. He slid it across the table under his hand. "It is a draft purchase and sale agreement," he said. "It is dated for tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" I asked. "The day of the hearing," Dylan said. "The moment Grant gets temporary guardianship, he has the legal authority to sign. They have a notary on standby. The wire transfer is already queued. They want to close before the court evaluator can do a full assessment. They are going to argue that the estate needs immediate liquidity to pay for your grandfather's care. So they sell the farm to pay for the prison they put him in," I said. Dylan nodded. "Exactly. And once the land is sold to a third party like Redwood, it is almost impossible to get back, especially since Redwood has already secured the demolition permits. They will bulldoze the farmhouse within 48 hours. They will tear it down," I asked. "They need the grade level for the drainage," Dylan said. "It is just dirt to them." I took the paper. My hand was trembling. But not from fear. From rage. "Thank you," I said. Dylan stood up. "I was never here. If they find out I talked to you, I am done. I will be blacklisted from every firm in the state. Why take the risk?" I asked. Dylan looked at me. "Because I hoped someone would do it for my grandfather." He walked out, blending into the morning crowd. I handed the paper to Nina. She scanned it, her eyes narrowing. "This is the smoking gun," she said. "It proves the urgency isn't medical. It is commercial." We went back to the car. As I buckled my seatbelt, my phone rang again. This time, the caller ID said, "Maple Haven Care Residence." I froze. "Answer it," Nina said. I picked up. "Hello? Sadie?" It was Walter. His voice was whisper-thin, sounding like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "Grandpa," I said, "are you okay?" "I am in the office," he said. "The nice nurse Brenda. She let me use the desk phone while the administrator is at lunch. She is keeping watch." "Grandpa, we are fighting," I said. "We found things. We know about the deal." "Sadie," Walter said. He sounded breathless. "I am scared." "I know," I said. "I know you are." "Not of the home," Walter said. "I am scared of the judge." He paused, and I heard him take a ragged breath. "If they declare me incompetent, Sadie, if they win that, I am alive, but I am gone. I become a piece of furniture. I lose the right to say no. I lose the right to sign my name. I lose the right to decide who walks through my door." I listened to the terror in his voice. It was a specific, existential terror. The fear of losing agency, the fear of being erased while you are still breathing. "I won't let that happen," I said. "You can't promise that," Walter said. "Your parents, they are very convincing. They have papers. They have doctors. I looked in the mirror this morning. Sadie, I look old. I look like what they say I am." "You are not what they say you are," I said fiercely. "You are the man who taught me to drive. You are the man who built that farm. You are Walter Hensley, and you are not done." There was a silence on the line. "Don't let them erase me." "Sadie," he whispered. "I promise," I said. The line clicked dead. I sat in the car, staring at the dashboard. The tears finally came, hot and fast. I let them fall for exactly 60 seconds. Then I wiped my face with my sleeve. "Drive," I said to Nina. "Where?" "To the courthouse," I said. "I want to see where they are going to try to bury him." We spent the afternoon at the law library near the courthouse. Nina was drafting a motion to suppress the travel risk notice, arguing it was hearsay and prejudicial. I was cross-referencing the names on the Maple Haven transfer documents. My phone chimed with a text message. It was Marianne. I hesitated. Every time she contacted me, it was a trap. But I had to look. It was a photo, a scanned image of a Polaroid from 25 years ago. It was me, age 8, sitting on a beach towel between Grant and Marianne. We were all laughing. The sun was shining. We looked like a perfect unit. Then a second photo, my high school graduation, Marianne fixing my cap, looking at me with undeniable pride. Then a text. "Remember when it was good? We can have this again. Sadie, just come home. Let us handle the heavy lifting. We love you so much." I stared at the screen. The images hit me like a physical blow. I remembered that beach trip. I remembered the graduation. I remembered feeling loved. For a moment, I wavered. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe they really did love me, and this was all a terrible misunderstanding. Maybe if I just apologized, we could go back to the way it was. Then I looked at the timestamp on the message. 3:45 p.m. The deadline for filing objections to the emergency guardianship was 4 p.m. They weren't reminiscing. They were timing me out. They were sending me nostalgia 15 minutes before the legal window closed, hoping I would hesitate, hoping I would call them back, hoping I would get emotional and miss the filing deadline. Love was not a feeling to them. It was a lever. It was a tactical nuke deployed to clear a path. I showed the phone to Nina. She looked at the time. "Ignore it," she said. She typed the final sentence of our objection and hit submit. "Filings accepted," she said. "We are on the docket." I looked at the photos one last time. I saw the smiles, but now I saw something else, too. I saw how Grant's hand was gripping my shoulder, just a little too hard. I saw how Marianne was positioning me for the camera. I deleted the thread. Nina's laptop pinged. "I got the subpoena returns from Maple Haven," she said. She opened a document, the transfer order for your grandfather. It wasn't signed by his primary care physician. "Who signed it?" I asked. "It was requested by a third-party care coordinator," Nina said. "A company called Everdale Wellness Navigation." "Everdale?" I asked. "I have never heard of them." Nina quickly searched the corporate registry. "Everdale Wellness Navigation," she read. "Registered agent address." She stopped. She turned the screen to me. "Suite 400, 110, Riverview Plaza." "The same suite," I said. "Pike Alder, Redwood Gate, and now Everdale Wellness." "It is a vertical monopoly," Nina said. "They have a law firm to file the petitions, a wellness company to recommend the facility placement, and a real estate shell to buy the assets once the owner is incapacitated. They are not just stealing the farm. Sadie, they are manufacturing the patient. It was a machine built to process the elderly into profit, and my parents had fed Walter into the gears. "We need to get to the courthouse," I said. "The pre-hearing conference is at 5. We drove to the Eden Park District Courthouse. It was a brooding limestone building with tall columns and steps that looked like they were designed to make you feel small. Grant was standing outside, near the bottom of the steps. He was alone. He was checking his watch. He saw us approaching. He didn't run. He didn't look guilty. He just stood there, his hands in the pockets of his camel coat, watching me come. I walked right up to him. "Stop it," I said. Grant looked at me. His face was calm, almost bored. "Stop what?" "Sadie. Stop the sale," I said. "We know about Redwood Gate. We know about the success fee. We know about the fake medical transfer." Grant didn't flinch. He smiled, a tight, patronizing little smile. "You think you know things," he said. "You have always been like this. You find one piece of a puzzle and think you see the whole picture." "I see the picture," I said. "You are selling Grandpa's home to a developer for a payout." "I am diversifying the estate," Grant said smoothly. "That farm is a money pit. The roof is leaking. The taxes are rising. Walter can't live there anymore. He needs professional care. I am ensuring he has the funds to pay for the best facility in the state. I am protecting the family legacy. You are protecting your commission, I spat. Grant stepped closer. He lowered his voice. You are out of your depth. Sadie, you are playing lawyer with a strip mall attorney and a handful of conspiracy theories. You are going to walk into that courtroom tomorrow and embarrass yourself, and when you do, you are going to hurt your mother. Don't talk about her, I said. Grant shook his head. He looked at me with a strange mixture of pity and disdain. You were never built for fights like this, he said softly. The words landed like a slap. You were always soft, he continued. You cry when you get angry. You hesitate. You doubt yourself. That is why we handled everything for you. That is why we are handling this. Go home. Sadie, before you break something you can't fix. He turned and walked up the steps, his coat flapping in the wind. I stood there, shaking. He was right. I was soft. I did cry when I was angry. I did doubt myself. But being soft didn't mean I was weak. Water is soft. But over time, it cuts through rock. I turned to Nina. Let's go, I said. That night, the motel room felt like a bunker. We had the evidence of the shell companies, the draft agreement, and the witness testimony from Dylan Rourke, if he showed up. But we still had a problem. The letter, the executor letter that Walter wrote. The original was gone, stolen from Clifford's office. Without it, we couldn't prove Walter's intent to remove my parents. At 10 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Clifford Marr. Sadie, he said. He sounded breathless again, but this time it wasn't panic. It was excitement. Clifford, I found it, he said. Found what I asked. The letter. I found a backup, Clifford said. I was going through my server logs. I remembered that Walter asked me to scan it the day he signed it. He was paranoid that he would spill coffee on it. So you have a digital copy, I asked. Gripping the phone. Yes, Clifford said. But I couldn't find it at first because I hid it too well. Walter told me to put it somewhere no one would look. Where was it, I asked. In a folder labeled 2018 Depreciation Schedules. Clifford said, it was nested inside 3 other boring tax folders. He laughed. A hysterical little sound. He planned for this. Sadie. Walter knew. He knew they might come looking. I felt a surge of pride for my grandfather. He wasn't just a victim. He was a strategist. Send it to Nina, I said. Now. I hung up. Nina looked up from her laptop. He has a scan, she asked. Yes, I said. She nodded, but she didn't smile. That changes things, she said, but it also creates a risk. What risk, I asked. If we introduce a digital copy of a sealed letter that has conveniently gone missing. Pike Alder will attack it, Nina said. They will claim it is a forgery. They will claim it was photoshopped. They will claim you and Clifford manufactured it to seize control of the estate. But it is real, I said. We know it is real, Nina said. But can we prove it? Without the original ink, it is just pixels. If we play this card and the judge throws it out, we look like the ones manipulating the evidence. She looked at me. It is a gamble. Sadie, if we use the letter, we are accusing them of suppressing evidence. We are raising the stakes to criminal conduct. If we lose that argument, we lose everything. I looked at the barricaded door. I thought about the scratches on the lock. I thought about Grant's voice. You were never built for fights like this. I thought about Walter, sitting in his wheelchair, terrified of being erased. We use it, I said. Are you sure, Nina asked. Once we submit it, there is no turning back. I am sure, I said. I wasn't built for fights like this. That was true. I wasn't built for lies. I wasn't built for theft. I wasn't built for betraying my own blood. But I was built for the truth. And tomorrow, I was going to tell it. The courtroom in the Eden Park district smelled of floor wax and old paper, a scent that I had always associated with civic order. Now, it smelled like a trap. We were seated at the defendant's table, me in my charcoal suit, Nina Carraway arranging her files with the precision of a surgeon laying out instruments. Across the aisle, at the petitioner's table, sat my parents. Grant looked impeccable in a navy suit, his posture relaxed. exuding the weary patience of a dutiful son dealing with a difficult situation. Marianne sat beside him, clutching a tissue, her eyes downcast. Between them sat Marcus Alder, the lead partner of Pike Alder. He was a man with a silver mane and a voice like poured gravel. He didn't look like a strip mall lawyer. He looked like a shark in a silk tie. Judge Holloway entered. He was a bald man with thick glasses and an expression of permanent fatigue. He took his seat, adjusted his robe, and looked over the rim of his spectacles. "We are here on the matter of the emergency petition for temporary guardianship of Walter Hensley," the judge said. "I have reviewed the filings. Mr. Alder, you may proceed." Alder stood up. He didn't walk to the podium. He stood right at his table, leaning forward on his knuckles, projecting an air of urgent gravity. "Your Honor, before we address the financial concerns, we must address the immediate safety of the respondent. Mr. Hensley." He paused, letting the silence settle. "Events have transpired in the last 24 hours that necessitate an immediate protective order. Not just for Mr. Hensley's estate, but for his person." My stomach tightened. I looked at Nina. She was writing something on her legal pad. Alder picked up a document. Yesterday morning, the respondent's granddaughter, Sadie Bailey, was detained by law enforcement at Larkspur International Airport. She was flagged by the automated threat system after a travel risk notice was filed. Ms. Bailey attempted to board a flight to this jurisdiction with the stated intent, according to her own previous communications, of removing Mr. Hensley from his care facility and taking him to an undisclosed location. "Objection," Nina said, standing up. "Mischaracterization." Alder ignored her. He turned to the judge, waving the paper. "Your Honor, the police report indicates that Ms. Bailey was agitated, uncooperative, and required a cooling-off period in a detention cell. This is not the behavior of a rational family member. This is the behavior of a volatile individual who is escalating. We are asking the court to grant temporary guardianship to Grant and Marianne Bailey immediately, simply to stabilize the situation and ensure Mr. Hensley is not subjected to a kidnapping attempt." I sat perfectly still. My hands were folded in my lap, but my fingernails were digging into my palms. It was a masterclass in distortion. He had taken the humiliation they inflicted on me and repurposed it as proof of my instability. I was the one who had been stopped, searched, and shamed. And now, my reaction to that abuse was being used to justify stripping my grandfather of his rights. Judge Holloway looked at the police report Alder had submitted. He frowned. "Ms. Caraway," the judge said, "your client was detained. She was stopped because of a filing submitted by Mr. Alder's firm," Nina said, her voice calm and cutting. "It was a circular trap, Your Honor. They filed a false report to trigger a police stop, and now they are using the police stop to justify the false report. It is a manufactured crisis." "Do you have proof it was false?" the judge asked. "I do," Nina said. She walked to the podium. She didn't bring the police report. She brought the map. "Your Honor, the petitioners claim that Mr. Hensley needs guardianship due to medical incapacity, and that his move to Maple Haven Care Residence was a medical necessity. However, I have here the transfer logs from the facility. The transfer was not requested by Mr. Hensley's primary physician. It was requested by a third-party care coordinator from a company called Everdale Wellness Navigation." She placed the document on the judge's bench. "So what the judge said, care coordinators are common." Nina placed a second document on the bench. "This is the corporate registration for Everdale Wellness Navigation. Its registered address is Suite 400, 110 Riverview Plaza." She placed a third document. "This is the registration for Pike Alder Legal Group. Same address, Suite 400. She placed a fourth document. "And this is the registration for Redwood Gate Holdings, a commercial real estate developer currently acquiring property along the riverfront. Same address, Suite 400. The courtroom went quiet. The air conditioning hummed. Nina looked at the judge. "Your Honor, this is not a medical case. This is a vertical monopoly. The petitioners have hired a law firm that shares an office with the care coordinator that recommended the facility, which also shares an office with the developer that wants to buy the respondent's land. This is not about protecting an elderly man. This is about processing an asset. Judge Holloway picked up the papers. He looked at the addresses. He looked at Alder. "Mr. Alder," the judge said, "do you share office space with a real estate developer?" Alder didn't blink. "We share a suite of executive offices." "Your Honor, it is a co-working arrangement. Standard in this economy. It implies no collusion. It implies proximity," Nina shot back. "And when that proximity results in a rushed guardianship petition filed 2 days before a real estate acquisition deadline, it implies motive." The judge leaned back. His expression shifted. The fatigue was replaced by a wary attention. He looked at Grant. "I will take this under advisement," the judge said, "but I want to hear about the family dynamic. The petitioners claim Ms. Bailey is a disruptive influence. Let us hear the testimony." Marianne took the stand first. She looked small in the witness chair. She kept touching her necklace, a nervous gesture that I knew was calculated to garner sympathy. "Mrs. Bailey," Alder asked gently, "tell us about your relationship with your daughter." Marianne looked at me. Her eyes filled with tears. "I love Sadie," she said, her voice trembling. "I love her more than anything, but she has always been difficult." "Difficult how?" Alder asked. "She is distant," Marianne said. "She moved to Ohio 10 years ago. We begged her to stay closer. But she wanted to be away from us. She rarely visits. We have to beg her to come for holidays. And when she does come, she is angry. Angry about what?" "Money," Marianne whispered. "She thinks we are withholding things from her. She has always been focused on what she is owed. When my father got sick, she didn't ask about his health. She asked about the will." I felt a physical blow to my chest. It was a lie so profound it stole the breath from my lungs. I had never asked about the will. Not once. Marianne continued. Gaining confidence, she calls him and upsets him. She tells him that we are trying to steal from him. She gets him agitated. That is why his blood pressure spikes. We tried to shield him from it, but she is relentless. She looked at the judge, a single tear tracking down her cheek. "We just want peace, Your Honor. We want my father to be safe. And Sadie? She is just not stable right now. The incident at the airport proves that. Who gets detained by police unless they are out of control? It was a polished narrative. It took the truth. I lived far away. I didn't visit often enough, and twisted it into a weapon. My absence wasn't due to work. It was due to distance. My concern wasn't love. It was greed. Sadie realizes this is why it works. It works because it touches on the insecurities every family has. Every child feels guilty for not visiting enough. Every parent worries they are losing their bond. Marianne was weaponizing the universal guilt of the modern family. Alder sat down, looking satisfied. Nina stood up. She didn't cross-examine Marianne. She simply said, "No questions." She knew that attacking a crying mother would backfire. We had to show, not tell. Sadie Nina whispered to me, "You are up." I walked to the stand. My legs felt heavy, as if I were wading through water. I swore to tell the truth. I sat down. I looked at the gallery. I saw Grant watching me. His face was impassive, but his eyes were hard. "You were never built for fights like this, Ms. Bailey," Nina said, standing by our table. She didn't come closer. She let me exist in the space alone. "Why do you live in Ohio?" "Because I needed to breathe," I said. The answer just came out. It wasn't the answer we had rehearsed. We had rehearsed saying for my career. I realized I couldn't use a script. Scripts were their weapon. I had to use the one thing they didn't have. "Can you elaborate?" Nina asked softly. "My parents love very tightly," I said. I looked at the judge. "I love them. I do. But their love comes with conditions. If you do what they say, you are good. If you ask questions, you are difficult." I moved away because I wanted to make my own mistakes. "Did you visit often?" Nina asked. "No," I said. "Why not?" "Because every time I came home." I felt small, I said. I felt like I was 12 years old again. I avoided conflict. I admit that. I stayed away because it was easier than fighting them. I looked at Marianne. She was staring at me, her mouth slightly open. "I am not perfect," I said. I should have come home sooner. I should have seen what was happening with Grandpa. I trusted my parents to take care of him because they told me they were handling it. I trusted them because they are my parents. I took a breath. But being absent doesn't mean I don't love him. And it certainly doesn't mean I'm trying to steal from him. I have a job. I have a savings account. I have never asked my grandfather for a dime. Your mother says you are money-focused, Nina said. I am focused on the truth, I said. And the truth is, my grandfather is not incompetent. He is just in the way. I saw the judge watching me. He wasn't taking notes anymore. He was listening. The honesty disarmed the room because it wasn't a perfect victim speech. I wasn't claiming to be a saint. I was admitting I was a coward who had finally decided to stop running. Nina sat down. Alder stood up for cross-examination. He buttoned his jacket. Ms. Bailey, isn't it true that you drove 8 hours through the night to get here after being released by police? Yes, I said. Isn't that erratic behavior? Alder asked. Driving through the mountains in the middle of the night? It is the behavior of someone who missed her flight because of a lie, I said. You seem very invested in the outcome of this hearing, Alder said. If your grandfather's land is sold, you stand to inherit less. Correct. If the land is sold, my grandfather loses his home, I said. It is not about inheritance. It is about his life. Alder scoffed. No further questions. I stepped down. I felt shaky, but clean. I had told the truth. Nina stood up again. Your Honor, the defense calls Dylan Rourke. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Grant turned around in his chair. I saw his posture stiffen. He whispered something to Marcus Alder. Alder looked confused. Dylan walked down the center aisle. He looked terrified. He was wearing a suit that was slightly too big for him. He clutched a briefcase to his chest like a shield. He was sworn in. He sat down, his eyes darting to Grant, then quickly away. Mr. Rourke, Nina said. Where are you employed? Redwood Gate Holdings, Dylan said. His voice was a squeak. He cleared his throat. Redwood Gate Holdings. I am a junior analyst. And what are your duties? Nina asked. I assess property values for potential acquisition. Dylan said. I run the pro forma models. Are you familiar with the property known as the Hensley Farm? Nina asked. Yes, Dylan said. It is parcel 44A in our development plan. Is Redwood Gate currently attempting to acquire this parcel? Yes. Is there a purchase agreement in place? Dylan hesitated. He looked at the judge. He looked at me. I nodded at him. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement. There is a draft agreement, Dylan said. Do you have it with you? Nina asked. Dylan opened his briefcase. His hands were shaking so bad he fumbled with the latch. He pulled out the document I had seen at the coffee shop. Yes, he said. Nina took it and handed it to the bailiff. Please read the condition in Section 4. Paragraph 2, Nina said. Dylan looked at his copy. Closing is contingent upon the appointment of Grant Bailey as temporary guardian of the seller, Walter Hensley, with full authority to liquidate real estate assets. A murmur went through the courtroom. So Nina said, raising her voice slightly, the sale is not contingent on Mr. Hensley's consent. It is contingent on Mr. Hensley losing his rights. Yes, Dylan said. And when is the closing scheduled for? Nina asked. Dylan looked at the floor. Tomorrow, he whispered. The wire transfer is already staged. Thank you. Mr. Rourke? Alder shot up. Objection. This witness is a low-level employee. He is not authorized to speak on strategic intent. He is reading a contract, Alder. Nina said. The intent is in the ink. Dylan looked at Grant. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like someone who was going to vomit. But he held his ground. I was told to watch the hearing, Dylan added. Unprompted, my boss said. As soon as the gavel drops, we send the notary. The judge looked at Grant. Grant was staring at the table. His jaw clenched so hard, a muscle feathered in his cheek. Judge Holloway took off his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. We are going to take a 15-minute recess, he said. When we return, I want to hear from the respondent. Mr. Alder stood up. Your Honor, as we stated, Mr. Hensley is in fragile health. Transporting him would be... I am not asking you to transport him. The judge cut him off. We have technology. Mr. Alder, set up a remote link with the facility. I want to see his face. But, Your Honor, Alder stammered. 15 minutes, the judge said. He banged the gavel. The courtroom dissolved into chaos. Alder leaned over to Grant, whispering furiously. Grant looked pale, for the first time. I saw panic on him, not anger, panic, the kind of panic that comes when the script falls apart and there are no more lines to read. Marianne was staring at me. Her eyes were wide, fearful. She looked like she wanted to come over, to explain, to fix it. I looked away. Nina leaned over to me. This is it, she said. If Walter can speak, we win. If he is medicated. She didn't finish the sentence. We waited. The bailiff wheeled in a large monitor on a cart. A technician fiddled with cables. The 15 minutes stretched into 20, then 30. Finally, the screen flickered to life. The image was grainy, but clear enough. It showed Walter sitting at a desk in the administrator's office at Maple Haven. He was wearing a cardigan over his hospital gown. He looked tired. His skin was gray, but he was sitting upright. Judge Holloway returned to the bench. Mr. Hensley, the judge said, "Can you hear me?" Walter leaned toward the camera. "I can hear you." Judge, for the record, please state your name. Walter Elias Hensley. Mr. Hensley, there is a petition before this court to appoint your son and daughter-in-law as your temporary guardians. Do you understand what that means? It means they decide what I eat and where I sleep, Walter said. His voice was scratchy, amplified by the cheap speakers of the monitor. Do you consent to this arrangement, the judge asked. No, Walter said. Why not? Because I am not a child, Walter said. I am old. I have a bad heart. My handwriting is shaky. But I know who I am. Grant stood up. Dad, please. We are just trying to help you. Sit down. Mr. Bailey, the judge snapped. Walter looked at the camera, as if he could see Grant through the lens. You aren't trying to help me, son, Walter said. You are trying to sell me. The room went deadly silent. Mr. Hensley, the judge asked, did you ask to be moved to Maple Haven? No, Walter said. I was told it was for observation. Then I was told I couldn't leave. Did you request a protective order against your granddaughter? Sadie Bailey. Walter looked around the room on his end, then looked back at the camera. Sadie, he asked, is she there? I stood up. I stepped into the aisle so the camera could see me. I am here, Grandpa, I said. Walter's face softened. A look of profound relief washed over him. The day she was stopped at the airport, Walter said to the judge, I was told she chose not to come. Marianne told me Sadie was too busy with work. She said Sadie didn't want the stress. He paused. That was a lie. They told me she abandoned me so I would sign their papers. But she is standing right there. Alder stood up. Your Honor. The respondent is clearly confused about the timeline. He is under significant strain. His paranoia regarding his family is a symptom of his decline. Walter laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. I am paranoid because there are people in my office stealing my mail, Walter said. I am paranoid because my son is listed as a consultant for the company trying to bulldoze my house. Alder froze. Mr. Hensley, the judge, asked gently, do you feel you are capable of managing your own affairs? I need help. Walter admitted, I can't drive anymore. I forget names sometimes, but I know the difference between help and control. He looked straight into the camera lens. Being tired doesn't mean being owned, he said. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was the truest thing I had ever heard. Being tired doesn't mean being owned. I felt a strange relief. I was believed. After the airport, after the police, after the shame, I was believed. But paired with it was the grief of knowing that this belief came at the cost of destroying my family. The judge looked at Grant. Grant was staring at the table, his face ashen. I have heard enough regarding the capacity issue, the judge said. However, there is the matter of the allegations of financial impropriety. Mr. Alder, you claim the current estate plan is being mismanaged. Nina touched my arm. Now she whispered. I looked at her. The letter, I whispered. If we don't introduce it, They can still argue that Grant is the natural heir, Nina said. We need to show that Walter explicitly tried to remove them. But it is a scan, I said. It is all we have, Nina said. I hesitated for one heartbeat. I looked at Marianne. She was weeping into her hands. If I did this, if I accused them of suppressing evidence, it wasn't just a civil dispute anymore. It was fraud. It was criminal. But then I looked at the screen. I looked at Walter. I nodded. Nina stood up. Your Honor, regarding the estate plan, we would like to introduce one final piece of evidence. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket. This is a digital scan of a sealed letter written by Walter Hensley 2 weeks ago. The original was stolen from the office of his accountant, Clifford Marr, yesterday during a break-in. Alder slammed his hand on the table. Objection! Alder roared. This is ambush by trial. We have never seen this document. Counsel is alleging a crime with zero evidence. A digital file? It could have been created this morning. It is authenticated by no one. It is authenticated by the metadata, Nina said calmly. And by the testimony of Mr. Marr, we object to the introduction of a non-original document, Alder shouted. It is hearsay. It is potentially forged. The judge looked at Nina. It is highly irregular, Ms. Caraway, without the original. Suddenly, Marianne stood up. She wasn't crying anymore. She looked frantic. It isn't a forgery, she blurted out. The room froze. Alder turned to her, his eyes wide with shock. Marianne, Mrs. Bailey. Sit down, Alder hissed. No, Marianne said, her voice rising. It isn't a forgery. I saw it. I saw the draft. She looked at the judge, her hands shaking. Grant said we had to protect him, she said, the words spilling out fast. He said the letter was a mistake. He said Walter wasn't thinking clearly when he wrote it. He said Harbor Line needed the deal to go through. Harbor Line. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Alder closed his eyes. Grant put his head in his hands. Nina didn't speak. She didn't have to. Judge Holloway looked at Marianne. Harbor Line, the judge repeated. Marianne looked around, realizing what she had done. She had spoken the name that didn't appear on any court document. She had spoken the name of the shell company that received the success fees. She put her hand over her mouth. The judge looked at Grant. Mr. Bailey, the judge said, his voice ice cold. Does the name Harbor Line Advisory mean anything to you? Grant didn't answer. Sadie, the judge asked me, does it mean anything to you? I stood up. Yes, Your Honor, I said. Harbor Line Advisory is a consulting firm registered to Grant B. Hensley in Crescent Harbor, Maryland. It is the entity set to receive a $250,000 success fee from Redwood Gate Holdings upon the sale of my grandfather's farm. The judge looked back at the screen, at Walter. Walter looked heartbroken. He didn't look triumphant. He looked like a man watching his son drown. I think the judge said quietly, that we are going to need a full evidentiary hearing, and I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation into potential elder abuse and fraud. He banged the gavel. Temporary guardianship denied. The sound of the gavel was loud, final, and utterly devastating. The courtroom was suspended in a heavy, suffocating silence following my mother's outburst. The name Harbor Line hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. Judge Holloway adjusted his glasses, his gaze shifting from the weeping woman in the witness box to the man in the navy suit who had suddenly gone very still. I am allowing the letter into evidence under provisional review, the judge said. His voice was no longer weary. It was sharp, cutting through the ambient noise of the room. Marcus Alder stood up, his composure fraying at the edges. Your Honor, I must strenuously object, Alder said. We are pivoting the entire foundation of this hearing based on a digital scan and an unverified exclamation from a distraught witness. The document Ms. Caraway has introduced names Clifford Marr as executor, yes, but it also explicitly references an attached codicil regarding the disposition of the real estate. Alder pointed a finger at the screen where the scan was displayed. Where is the codicil? Your Honor, the document is incomplete. It refers to an attachment that does not exist in this record. Without the codicil, the letter is fragmentary. It could be a draft. It could be a rejected version. We cannot fundamentally alter the estate plan based on a ghost document. Nina Carraway stood up. She didn't shout. She spoke with the quiet intensity of someone who knows they have already won the moral argument. Even if the legal one was still messy, the codicil is missing because the original file was stolen from Mr. Marr's office, Nina said. The absence of the document is not proof of its invalidity. It is proof of interference. We are looking at a pattern. Your Honor, the mail was redirected, the office was burglarized, the medical transfer was engineered. The missing codicil is simply the final piece of the cover-up. This isn't about the money anymore. I sat at the table, watching my parents. Grant was staring straight ahead, his jaw set in a line of granite. Marianne was shredding a tissue in her lap, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an exit. The courtroom had shifted. It was no longer a dispute about assets or capacity. It was a dispute about reality. My parents had spent weeks writing a story where I was unstable, where Walter was incompetent, and where they were the heroic saviors of the family legacy. Now, the ink was running. The judge turned to the monitor, where my grandfather sat. Mr. Hensley, the judge said, can you clarify the nature of this codicil? Walter leaned toward the camera. He looked drained. The adrenaline of the confrontation was fading, leaving him gray and trembling. I wrote it 2 days after the men from Redwood Gate came to my porch. Walter said, why did you write it? The judge asked. Because I found a notebook on Grant's desk in the study, Walter said. He had been staying with me for the weekend. I was looking for a pen. I opened his notebook, and I saw the calculations. Walter paused, his voice cracking. He had written down the sale price, and next to it, he had written distribution split. He had already spent the money on paper. Judge, he had calculated the cost of a condo in Florida. He had calculated the cost of a new boat. He hadn't asked me if I wanted to sell. He had just assumed I would be gone. I watched Grant. He didn't look at the screen. He stared at the wood grain of the table. I didn't confront him. Walter continued softly. I put the notebook back. Why didn't you confront him? The judge asked. Walter looked down. Because I wanted to believe I was wrong, he said. The confession broke my heart. It wasn't the anger of a patriarch. It was the quiet humiliation of a father. I wanted to believe that if I gave them time, they would choose me, Walter said. I wanted to believe that my son and daughter loved me more than they loved the prophet. So I wrote the codicil as a safeguard. I thought if I secured the land legally, they would stop. I didn't think they would. He trailed off. He didn't finish the sentence. I didn't think they would lock me away. Mr. Bailey, the judge said, please take the stand. Grant stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He smoothed his tie. He walked to the witness box with a terrifying calmness. He was a man who believed he could talk his way out of an avalanche. Mr. Bailey, the judge said, you have heard the testimony regarding Harborline Advisory. I have, Grant said. His voice was steady, reasonable. Is it true that you are the sole proprietor of this entity? It is a consulting vehicle I use for freelance work, Grant said. It is perfectly legal. And is it true that this entity has an agreement with Redwood Gate Holdings? Grant nodded dismissively. We have a draft framework for consulting services. I have expertise in regional development. They value my input. Does that input include facilitating the acquisition of your father's farm? Grant sighed, a sound of long-suffering patience. Your Honor, you are looking at this through the lens of a conspiracy theory presented by opposing counsel. The reality is much simpler. My father is 82. The farm is failing. It is a liability. I was engaging in risk management. I was exploring options to convert a decaying asset into liquid capital that could ensure his care for the next 20 years. And the success fee the judge asked, $250,000. Was that for his care? That is a standard industry commission, Grant said. I am a professional. I don't work for free. If I were a third-party broker, no one would blink at that fee. The fact that I am his son doesn't negate the value of my work. And the alias, Nina asked, standing up from her chair. Grant turned to her. It is not an alias. It is a trade name. It is a name designed to hide your identity from the probate court, Nina said. She picked up a paper. Why is the payment schedule labeled upon guardianship confirmation, she asked. Grant tightened his grip on the railing. That is standard closing language. No, Nina said. Standard language is upon closing. Upon guardianship confirmation implies that the obstacle to the sale wasn't the market. It was the owner. You weren't managing risk. Mr. Bailey, you were removing the owner so you could collect a commission on his property. I was keeping outsiders away, Grant shouted. The veneer cracked. The calm, reasonable mask fell away, revealing the jagged anger underneath. He pointed at me. She doesn't understand, Grant said, his voice shaking. She lives in a fantasy world where old farmhouses stand forever and money grows on trees. She doesn't know what it costs to maintain a legacy. I was doing what had to be done. I was making the hard choices while she was playing architect in Ohio. The judge leaned forward. Why the alternate name? Mr. Bailey, the judge asked quietly. Grant looked at the judge. He opened his mouth, but the smooth corporate explanation didn't come. If it was just risk management, the judge pressed. Why did you feel the need to hide it behind a Maryland shell company? Grant stared at the judge. For the first time, he looked small. Because I knew how it would look, he whispered. Thank you, the judge said. Step down. Marianne was called back to the stand. I hoped, in that moment, for a redemption. I hoped my mother would look at me and say, I am sorry. I hoped she would look at Walter and beg for forgiveness. But real life isn't a movie. People don't change their entire personality in a single moment of pressure. They protect themselves. Mrs. Bailey. Nina asked, Did you sign the travel risk notice that led to your daughter's detention? Marianne looked at her hands. Yes. Did you believe your daughter was actually kidnapping your father? Marianne hesitated. She looked at Grant, who was staring at the floor. She looked at me. Grant said it was necessary, she said. Her voice was thin, reedy. He said Sadie was emotional. He said if she came, she would cause a scene and stress Dad out. He said we needed a cooling-off period. So you lied to the police because your husband told you to? Nina asked. I didn't think they would arrest her. Marianne cried out. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. Sadie, I didn't think they would put you in a cell. I thought they would tell you to go home. I thought they would just turn you around. She wasn't confessing to malice. She was confessing to a profound, devastating weakness. She was admitting that she had allowed her husband to weaponize her against her own child, because it was easier than telling him no. It is not innocence, I realized. It is complicity wrapped in denial. She was the getaway driver who claimed she didn't know a bank was being robbed, even as she held the bag. The judge sat back. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. I have heard enough, the judge said. He picked up a pen and signed an order. The petition for temporary guardianship filed by Grant and Marianne Bailey is denied with prejudice. He looked at Alder. Mr. Alder, I am referring the filings submitted by your firm to the State Bar Association for review regarding ethical conduct, and I am referring the matter of the break-in at Mr. Marr's office and the potential fraud regarding the Harbor Line documents to the district attorney for investigation. Grant didn't move. Marianne put her face in her hands. However, the judge continued, looking at Nina. The estate is in limbo. We have a letter naming a new executor. But we have a missing codicil regarding the primary asset. Until that codicil is located or reconstructed, I cannot distribute the estate. He looked at the screen. Mr. Hensley, I am ordering an independent court evaluator to visit you tomorrow, not a doctor from Everdale, a doctor appointed by this bench. If they clear you, you regain full control. Until then, I am freezing all assets. No one buys, no one sells, no one moves a dime. He banged the gavel. This court is adjourned. The sound echoed like a door slamming shut. I walked out of the courtroom into the hallway. The air felt cooler here, less charged with the electricity of lies. I pulled out my phone. I needed to hear his voice. I dialed the number for the administrator's office at Maple Haven, hoping Walter was still there. He answered on the first ring. Sadie, he said. We did it, I said. leaning against the cold marble wall. They didn't win. Walter didn't cheer. He breathed a long, rattling sigh. They didn't win, he said, but nobody won. Sadie. I know, I said. Sadie, Walter said, his voice dropping to a whisper. I need to tell you something. The judge asked about the codicil. Yes, I lied, Walter said. I froze. You lied. I didn't lose the only copy, Walter said. I made a second one. I was so scared that day. I made a carbon copy. I hid it. Where I asked, where is it? Grandpa. There was a silence on the line. A long, terrifying silence. I don't remember, he whispered. My heart stopped. I know I hid it, Walter said, panic rising in his voice. I know I put it somewhere safe, somewhere Grant wouldn't look. But Sadie, my mind, it is like a fog. I reached for the memory just now, and it wasn't there. It was the tragedy of the situation. My parents had lied about his incompetence, but the stress of their betrayal had triggered the very decline they claimed existed. They had broken him to prove he was broken. It is okay, I said, forcing my voice to be steady. It is okay. We will find it. I will come to the house. We will look together. You have to find it, Sadie, Walter said. If we don't find it, the lawyers will fight for years. They will drain everything. I will find it, I promised. I hung up. Time was no longer just a variable. It was an antagonist. We had stopped the immediate sale, but the clock was ticking on Walter's memory and the estate's solvency. I turned to leave, and there was Grant. He was standing by the large stone columns near the exit. He looked diminished, stripped of his arrogance, but there was something else in his eyes, a cold, flat calculation. Sadie, he said. I stopped. I didn't step closer. It is over. Dad, I said. The judge referred it to the DA. You need a criminal lawyer, not a probate one. Grant laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You think this is about me? He said. He took a step out of the shadows. You don't understand what you just triggered, he said quietly. What is that supposed to mean, I asked. Redwood Gate isn't just a developer. Sadie, Grant said. They have investors, private equity, people who don't like it when their money gets tied up in family squabbles. I promised them this deal. I took advances on fees to set this up. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. You didn't just stop a sale, he said. You stopped a machine. And that machine doesn't have brakes. Is that a threat, I asked? Grant shook his head. He looked at the courthouse doors, then back at me. It is a warning, he said. You wanted the truth? The truth is, I was the dam holding the water back. You just blew up the dam. He walked past me, out into the rain. I watched him go. I didn't know if he was trying to scare me or if he was genuinely afraid. I only knew that the story wasn't over. It had just changed genres. Nina walked up beside me. She watched Grant's retreating figure. What did he say, she asked. He said I triggered something I said. He said the machine doesn't have brakes. Nina adjusted her bag. Let him talk, she said. He is cornered. She turned to me. Sadie, you have a choice to make. The judge paused the distribution. But the referral to the DA is serious. You can pursue civil claims for the emotional distress, the false imprisonment at the airport, the fraud. We can bury them. I looked at the rain falling against the glass doors. If I pursue it, I said, they go to prison. Maybe Nina said, or they lose everything they have in legal fees. Either way, the family is done. It is scorched earth. I felt the weight of the decision. Justice could protect Walter. It could validate everything I had been through. But it would also destroy what was left of the people who raised me. It would make me the executioner of my own parents. But then I remembered the scratches on the motel room lock. I remembered Walter sitting in that wheelchair, terrified of being erased. They made their choice, I said. Nina nodded. I walked out the doors, into the cool, wet air of Virginia. I stood on the steps, looking out at the gray sky. I was 33 years old. I was alone. My parents were strangers. My grandfather was fading, but I was standing on solid ground. I took a deep breath, tasting the rain. It tasted like iron and ozone. It tasted like the truth. I walked down the steps, ready to find the missing codicil, ready to face the machine, ready for whatever came next. The window was closed, but the door was wide open. Thank you for listening to this story. We often think of revenge as a loud, explosive act, but sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to accept the lie that others have written for you. It's about reclaiming your own reality when everyone else is trying to edit you out of the script. I'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to fight to be believed by the people who were supposed to protect you? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to follow Sadie's journey and hear more stories about justice, family secrets, and the long road to the truth, please subscribe to Revenge Stories, share your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next chapter.